Hi, and welcome to The Sacred We, the number one and I think only podcast out there that's going to teach you how to use the medium of your relationship for your own awakening. See, this is work that isn't for the faint of hearted. Not everyone wants to do this work. You know, when we first started this, I had this vision and this mission to reach millions of people. And I'm going to be real. Most people are terrified and not willing to do the work to claim what they're actually looking for, which is a relationship that thrives, that's in service to humanity so that you can experience the juiciness of that kind of love. It's real adult love, but it requires some work. It's not super sexy and enticing, is it? But what I have found over the years is that doing the work actually creates more inner calm, peace, and freedom because it brings us back to our nature, where we return to that place of belonging, the enoughness, and sharing that with another person. It's the most enjoyable experience ever. And we love bringing these conversations to help you experience that also. Today's episode, Courtney, it's going to be a solo cast here. Courtney's going over mapping your relational imprint, how to heal relational patterns. You are going to want to listen to this one all the way through because she has been the oracle that has initiated me into this way of being. And I'm so grateful for that. The more I get to know my own personal imprints, the more I liberate myself. And I hope you get that from this as well. And you're going to want to make sure you stay till the end because Courtney has an offer that she's just created, and there's only a few spots where you're not just going to hear and learn about this, you'll actually do it, mapping out your relational imprint. All right, here's Courtney.
Hi, and welcome to this solo episode of the Sacred We podcast with me, Courtney Wren. And today we're going to dive deep and dirty into imprints, mapping your relational imprint in order to heal relationship patterns. And this is for those of you, if you're like me, that you want to do the deepest relationship work possible and get to the root of how to transform and heal through relationship. This is when we get the hang of mapping our imprints and how to heal them, then we start to become masters of relationship. That is where we hit sacred relationship territory. It's where we start to become the priestesses and also, the magicians, the magic ones who are actually able to go in and heal their relationship at the root and dance in the dance of life and learn so much in doing it. And I'm excited to share this with you. And, what is an imprint? What is an imprint? So I'm going to tell a little story, an example of an imprint. So when I was a child, the sequencing of how my relationship went with my father is that we were very close. I was very beloved, and he devoted himself to me deeply, and he really wanted to be a father. And we were very close until I was about the age 3. And when I turned 3, I reached a new developmental stage where I started to assert myself more, to have more of my own personality and ground. And because of what happened for my dad with his dad, he was not able to hold that because, years later, what I heard and learned about is that my dad, when he was around that age, was when his father ended up going into actually a mental institution. And so my dad was not able to hold me in that. And basically what happened is there was rupture, and he pulled away, and he never really came back. He was there. He was my dad. He loved me and showed up in so many ways, but the connection was not there. That deep bond got ruptured. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that we started to have a bit more of a bond again. And actually, he was able to acknowledge, I lost you. And I mean, there's so much to the story. I could go so deep into all the layers of it. But I also want us to really hold my dad, because my dad was just carrying this imprint in himself, right? This generational imprint. And is very common in many where there's been attachment issues up the line, that where attachment was ruptured or where we weren't held as parents, it will just inevitably play out with our child unless we go get support and we work on it in our body and in our nervous system. So here I was, that was my imprint. And what would play out for me in relationship with men is around year 3, there would start to be rupture, distance. I would start to feel, I would literally watch men start to move away from me. I'd watch them just start, it was like around that time, they would just start to move away from me, because now I understand they were feeling that in my field. Then it would start to trigger that little girl in me who would get angry and go into all her unhealthy coping strategies. First I would get angry, and then I would go into the fine, I'm fine on my own, because that's what I ended up doing, as a child, is not looking for it. And inevitably there would just be more and more space and the relationship would end. So, here I am in a relationship with Mike, and it happens again. I've done all this work. Here it is again. But here's the thing, is that Mike and I had the language of imprints. I was able to explain to him, hey, I've got this imprint, and this is how it shows up. This is how it lives in my body. This is how it will show up between us. And he was able to become an ally to notice when he started to play it out. So for him to notice, oh, this is me actually playing out Courtney's imprint, because all of a sudden I'm just wanting more and more space. I'm wanting to get away. And we were able to work with it. I worked with it. He worked with it. And we made it through, because we understood how to work with imprints and understood that it wasn't about Mike and I. It was about my experience with my dad's experience with his parents, and who knows how far up the line, right? And this is what an imprint is. An imprint is both an energetic imprinting and also in our actual DNA and in our nervous system, information that gets passed down. It's made up of from the ancestral field. So that all this, the good and the traumatic that happened to our ancestors, it's made up of our moment of conception, what was going on when we were conceived, what was happening during our time in the womb, what was happening at the time of our birth, and then the first 3 years of life. So that's kind of the most formative, okay? Then, of course, there is like what was going on culturally, what was going on astrologically, what was going on in the world. All of that ends up imprinted in our field. Now, we're also shaped from 3 years old and up, but I think it's something like 97% of the patterns we end up dancing in this life stem from that kind of 3 years old and earlier. But if you notice, what's interesting about that is that's the time where we start to come into conscious memory, like actual explicit memory. Whereas before that time, memory is implicit, meaning it's not something we actively remember, like, oh, I remember when that happened. It's implicit, which means it lives in the felt sense in our body. It's a feeling that we feel in our body. Our body remembers it, but our minds don't. So we're literally walking around with the stories in our bodies, in our DNA, and in our energy field that is like this cosmos that shapes not only how other people feel us, but shapes how we feel the world. And so then we go out in the world and we start to project out everything that is in our field, our personal cosmos, our personal imprinting. It's like a code that's written in our field. And we project it out onto our partner. I say to my clients all the time, you will project onto your partner. That's part of it. That's what we're all doing. We're all projecting, all of it. All of us, we're projecting. We don't get out of that. And other people will feel what's in our imprinting, and they will start to act out what is in our field. A way of saying this is they get lassoed into it. They get pulled into the field, like Mike started to play out my field. And then not only that, but they will have their personal imprinting and what they are bringing in their field. And then now our two fields meet. And so this is what imprinting is. It's all of this information that we live inside of, that we aren't actually consciously aware of, but lives in our body. Okay. Now you might be thinking, but wait a minute, that sounds kind of crazy making. There would be so many patterns in there. And there are. There are. And believe me, many a person has gotten very lost in trying to heal all of it or sort it all out. But here's the fascinating thing about being a human and evolving and awakening and being in a relationship, why a relationship is so healthy. If we just come in and we just let the patterns play out. So the ancestral patterns of like grandma and grandpa's marriage and, the ancestral pattern of, children dying young, the ancestral imprint of, divorce or separation, whatever the imprinting is. And there's lots of it, right? I think Richard Rudd talks about at this point, because we're carrying so much ancestral trauma, it's like 98% of our DNA is called junk DNA, meaning it's not the healthy blueprint. The healthy blueprint that's in us is overlaid with all this trauma. If we come in and we just play out the patterns, so we don't work with it, we don't do anything about it, maybe we think to ourselves, and this is very common, okay, and just check out if this is you. A very common thing is that people think that if they want to live different than their parents, or they want to do it different, and they're just going to set their mind to it and they're going to do it different, that it'll play out different. It won't. The patterns are too strong. Life will organize to meet the patterns. So wanting to do it different, even having a good plan of how you're going to do it different, won't actually get you out of the patterns because the patterns are so alive. So you'll just end up dressing up the same patterns in a different way is what ends up happening. So in constellations work that I do, what they talk about is that if we just play out the patterns, we will live our fate. That's called our fate. It's what's already written. It's already written in you now that if you just play it out, that's what will happen to you. And many people live their fate in relationships, in intimate partnership. They live out the fate of the relationship their parents had. They live out the fate of the relationship their grandparents had. They live out, the fate of what was happening when they were conceived and the dynamics that were going on, and they live that. The cool thing is, though, is when we as a soul decide that we're going to become aware of what the material, the human material that's in this body, in this DNA, what's here. This is the material that's here for us to grow and evolve and learn. Okay? And our soul, this is the right package for us to learn certain things, to learn certain lessons. And when our soul and our desire of who we want to be and what it is we want, especially relationally, meets with the material, the ancestral material, the material from, all of our imprinting, and we start to consciously work with it in our bodies and in our field, that is what moves us into our destiny. That is what moves us through the material and into creating our destiny. It's this co-creation between our soul and the material. And what it also does is it starts to transform the world around us because we start to lighten the load. We start to be able to live in more coherence, to heal the ancestral line and to heal the collective field. And so this is the big picture of like why a soul would choose to work with it. Now, what is so powerful about intimate partnership and also parenting is that both will mirror to you your imprint in a way that nothing else will. So, there's a very common thing that happens where people will do personal work, and personal work is important. I have done lots of personal work. It's really important to get to know yourself, to go sit in ceremony with yourself, to meditate with yourself, to go out in the forest and get to know yourself, to get support and getting to know yourself. That's very important. But if that's all we do, we will be limited in what is shown to us about our imprinting. Because a lot of the imprinting actually comes alive when we start to interface with other humans, because that is where the other humans will mirror back to us what is in our field that we don't know of yet, that we're not even aware of. They will start to show us through how they are with us, through how they interact with us, through the patterns we start to notice when we're relating with people, through the patterns that keep playing out in our intimate relationship, no matter who we're with. It's actually showing us what's in our field so that we can start to notice it, be aware of it, and work with it to help it heal. And then the thing that I love about relationship is if we can learn to be allies together, to work together to heal the imprinting, that is when the growth of relationship becomes exponential. That's when we actually start to really deeply heal. Because now we have an ally who wants to understand what's in our field, who wants to understand our imprinting, and who wants to help us heal it. Not fix it, not take it on and make it better, but to actually offer something that's going to help something heal. Like for me, with that imprint story that I shared, it was extremely helpful that Mike, just started to become aware of where he'd start to avoid and not want to relate with me and go into the pulling away more and more. And he just started to consciously choose not to do that, to not follow that pull, to move towards, to offer me reassurance, to offer me eye contact, all the things, right, that I had needed from my dad that he wasn't able to give me because he didn't have it. Mike was able to start consciously doing that, but he couldn't do it until he became aware of the imprint, because imprints are strong. I have another cool story, and this is around parenting. So my son, I birthed him at home. I've been with him since day one. Very devoted mother, lots of focus on attachment. And I had done enough attachment and nervous system regulation work to be a good enough mother, right? Now, Mike, for those of you that don't know his history, Mike was adopted twice in the first year of his life. And actually one of the people that adopted him was his grandmother, who ended up dying. And so what was interesting about Mike's story, though, is even though he kind of had these big losses, part of his imprinting was that in life, there was always someone that would come in and meet his need at times when he needed it. So for example, his grandmother swooped in and cared for him very lovingly when his mother couldn't. And then when he went to live with his adoptive family, his older sister, who was a lot older, became a really beautiful mothering figure to him. And his brother-in-law actually became a beautiful father figure for him. He also ended up having a best friend who lived down the road who had a mother that really mothered him and took him under his wing. So Mike really had in his imprinting loss of mother, really intense pain around that. But then life would bring in mothering and all these other people in other forms. And then my field, I come from a long line of people who marry their high school sweetheart, they have children, you stay together forever. And, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, very devoted mother. And she was pretty much the only person that took care of me, other than a babysitter every once in a while, right? So very different fields. So here I am, I'm mothering, Mike's son. And what I start to become aware of is that Cedar would have these experiences where there was such an intense, where's my mother? Like absolute terror, right? That was not accurate to his lived experience. But it was totally that ancestral imprint. And because I understood that, I remember one moment in the shower in particular, and I could feel that he was moving through his body all of what had been in the field from Mike. And Mike's not having a mother, and that the mother wasn't there. And, there was mother, but not birth mother, not, that level of mother. And Cedar processing that through his field. And then, in my field, there was also, lack of secure attachment. So that was there. And I remember holding him, and I could feel that this was not about me and Cedar. This was about him moving through his body, what had landed in his body from up the line. And that just holding him deeply and tenderly. And one of the things that has been part of my journey is understanding that building secure attachment with Cedar, because of the package that he has of ancestral stuff, is he needs a lot more holding for that secure attachment to land. And if I didn't understand that about imprinting, it'd be really easy for me to start to judge him or judge myself or think there's something wrong, instead of, yeah, this makes sense. It makes sense that there's going to need to be a lot more reassurance and a lot more care and a lot more presence to really help it land, because of the rupture that happened one generation above, And so I am healing the first generation of really intense adoption trauma, through my son. And I'm doing it, and it's beautiful, but I want to share another layer of the imprinting. So when Cedar was about 2, I started noticing that something happening, and it took a while. It was like, what is happening? So there was this interesting thing where so many people would offer to help take care of Cedar. There was like this abundance of people wanting to come in and support. I can watch Cedar this night, and we can watch him, and then you can have this time. And it was almost like the field was moving faster than I could even keep up with. The field was just coming in to take care of Cedar. And it was weird because it was so different from my childhood, right? Where it was like the opposite. And one of the things I started to notice, it was almost like Cedar was confused who his mother was. So even when I was there, he was confused who his mother was. And then I started to realize, this is the imprint. This is the imprint. Because the generation above, it wasn't clear who mother was. Where is mother? Like that's what Mike would have been feeling. And yet, but here's all these people coming in to take care of me and my needs are met. But where's mother? And it was like Cedar was literally embodying that. If I had not noticed that, it was like the field was so strong. It was almost like I was getting pushed out of being mother. Like I was almost like the field was making me move out. And that was weird to me because that was not my childhood. So I was really taking notice. But it would have been very easy for me to be like, wow, I'm so supported. There's so many people coming in to support. And to just slowly be sitting back too far. Very easily. Would have been very easy to do. And miss the actual distress in Cedar and what was needed for the healing. And so because I understood about imprints, I was able to, and noticed it in my body, I was able to consciously move through it and let everyone know, hey, this is part of the imprint that's in the field. And Cedar, I'm your mom, and getting everyone to affirm that to help clarify in the field. And I had to really work at that to reestablish. And again, what I'm saying is this is all energetic, because on the visual on the outside, I was also there. I was right there, right? But what can happen is the field gets so strong and so convincing. I could feel the part of me that could go, oh, it looks like life is just wanting to give me lots of support so that I don't have to work so hard as a mother, or I don't have to. And of course, the gift that Mike's field brought into my field was support, right? I've had so much support because Mike's field brought that in, and I have continued to receive that. But I needed to really get in my seat of mother and do it from that place of I'm protecting my son, I'm here for him, and then we're going to lean into support. So that's, another example of imprinting. So the thing to understand for any of you out there that are like, oh yeah, totally starting to make connections. When I'm working with clients on couples work and also child work, like parenting, the ultimate tipping point, always, when it's like, oh, they're starting to get it, is when they start to realize that almost everything they're experiencing with their partner or with their child is somehow linked to their imprinting. And that even though they've been trying to do this new thing, they've actually been playing out the pattern. And that is when radical responsibility, radical self-love, and humbleness start to happen. Like, oh, right, this is in my field. This is what's playing out. And that humbleness, that self-responsibility brings us back into our own seat, where we start to get curious about how we can help the imprint actually transform and heal. Now, the cool thing is what we can do to help it heal is we can start to become aware of what was needed back then that didn't happen, that we ourselves can start to bring in now. And by this, I don't mean like getting your partner to caretake you and give you whatever you want, which sometimes can get a bit confusing. Like, yeah, if you just parent me in the way I wasn't parented, then I'll be better, right? But that's not really it. It's more, I start to get to know my imprint. I start to get clear what would be needed. And then I let my partner know, hey, I've got this imprint, I've got this thing. And I start to bring them in as an ally. And this is some of the work in how to do that and how to map that out and what would be needed to help it repattern. That's the kind of work that I do right now. I actually have a mapping your relational imprint container, a limited spot. I only have 5 spots. I think there's 3 spots left. Just started announcing it, where we actually will do this work together. It's 3 sessions, 2 months of WhatsApp support, and I just really dive into your imprinting. Also, I am going to be offering a mapping your relational imprint Masterclass in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. If you're not already on my mailing list, there will be a link in the show notes that'll tell you, how to sign up for my mailing list so that you receive that information. So, because that's where it really starts to land, is how we bring our partner in as an ally and how we actually start to bring in the new information. One powerful story that's coming to mind for me around imprints is I had a client who, one of the things that was happening for her is that her and her teenage son, her preteen son, there was a lot of distance. And it was hard for her to really find him and connect. And she was trying, but it was hard to find that place of connection. And, at first she was kind of trying to problem solve with me what she needed to do in the relationship now. But the work we ended up doing is we actually went back to work on what had happened in her bonding with her son, during conception, her pregnancy time, her birth, and some of what had played out during that time. There was a traumatic C-section and she was in a lot of turmoil during the pregnancy, and there was disconnect between her and the father, an energy of disconnect. And during that time, when we went in and we worked with that in her field, which also will end up shifting it in your child's field, because your child's field is deeply impacted by what's in your field. Then, and I had really assured her that this is what would happen. And I remember the moment when she messaged me, she said, "Oh my goodness, me and my son are connecting so much deeper than we ever have." And she was just amazed, because it wasn't her doing anything different now, although I'm sure it showed up that she was presenting different, but it was actually clearing the relational imprint that had been there from the beginning, that opened up space between them for connection, because all of that unresolved stuff behind her was actually between her and her son now. And that's what lots of people don't know or get. It's like, what they're feeling between them and their child, or them and their partner, is the unprocessed imprinting. Now, the journey of sacred relationship and conscious parenting is where we start to be able to have the skill to track for the imprinting, to notice it, get curious, and work with it, and then how to actually rewire it. And I actually have something called a Soma process that I teach, that again will be in the Masterclass and also in this one-on-one container offering, where I teach you how to actually use this process in daily life to get better and better at working with the imprints that are alive in your field and understanding your partners. Now, what I want to talk about is when imprints ping, because the last piece I want to say about this is often where couples are stuck. So where you've gotten really stuck, the place you're stuck, and we all know this, and it just keeps replaying and replaying. And maybe you even try a relational technique, or maybe you even learn a new skill, or you try to, you try so many things to do it different, and it just keeps replaying and replaying. This is where it's the two imprints of you and your partner are pinging. So what's happening is that the material in both fields are triggering each other simultaneously. And because that's happening, it's hard for either person to offer enough ground to support the other person in their healing, right? It's sort of like we start mirroring to each other exactly the worst thing that could be mirrored, and we're not able to become the solid ground because we're also getting pinged. So I'm going to give you an example. A classic one Mike and I have had is, he was really needing to repair around being allowed to be, and he's still working on this, because he wasn't celebrated and met in his bigness, his aliveness, his creativity, his capacity, like really met and celebrated and given praise for where he succeeds, where he does really well, where he's on fire, and in that exuberant energy. For him, there's been a lot of feeling shut down in that place. Like that's not allowed, or there's something wrong when he's in that. And so inevitably, people tend to try to shut him down, shame him when he goes into that, right? Because it's so strong. It's so strong. And even people that don't even know they're doing it or even realize. So what he's needing to rewire would be for me to be able to welcome him and celebrate him and just be, with his alive energy, which of course there are definitely moments where I can and I have. But here's where the pinging happens. What I am healing in my system is I had a very fiery father. And where I wasn't met was in my need for gentleness, for to be met in the gentleness. Like I wasn't met in the gentleness. And I don't know if any of you know the Pattern app, but I have the Pattern app. It's an astrology app. And it tells me all the time how gentle and sensitive I am, which I have other qualities too, but it tells me over and over, you are very gentle and you are very sensitive. And so there was a mismatch for me in my childhood in terms of I wasn't getting met with the gentleness, right? So I'm needing for the masculine to approach me with a gentleness, with a slowness. And otherwise, my nervous system will go into a fright, a protection, feeling overrun or controlled is how my nervous system can read it. If a masculine's like in a big fiery energy. So you can see where we would ping, right? So, like Mike comes in, he's exuberant, he's woo woo, and he wants to share and like, yeah, he succeeded. And he comes in hot, he comes in fast. It's like, and that's what where he's needing me to meet him. And my nervous system is like, oh my gosh, masculine, fiery, talking really loud, moving really fast. And my nervous system goes into a protection. And then, Mike's nervous system feels that protection. And then now I'm not meeting him on what he's needing. And my nervous system is in the story of, I need gentle. And this is the kind of place that couples get stuck. And it's also where couples start to really project how awful their partner is. This is where we start to think and tell ourselves a story about how awful our partner is. Because, Mike could just be gentle with me and he won't be gentle with me, right? I have that voice in me. And you won't even be gentle with me in that place. And I'm telling you, I need you to be gentle with me. And this is where I could get outraged. Mike doesn't care about me. Mike doesn't actually want to take care of me at all, And especially this happens if it goes on and on and on for years. And then Mike's version is, Courtney doesn't actually want me to succeed. She doesn't want me to be happy. She doesn't care about, my happiness. And even when I'm telling her, I really need to be met in this, she's still not doing it. But of course, neither of us, what our nervous systems are doing is not actually representative of who we are as people or what we actually feel about each other. Courtney actually is super pumped that Mike is succeeding. And Mike actually really gets that Courtney needs gentleness. But in that moment, when we come to meet, our fields are imprinting ping. And this is where the majority of couples get stuck and they don't make it through. And they start to, because they don't understand that it's just an imprint, they start to personalize what's happening. And they start to make a story about the kind of person their partner is, based on that pinging. And so I'd love for you to just even sit with that, because that's a big download. But if you could even get the hang of noticing, oh, I wonder if that's a place where our imprints are pinging, not a place where he's selfish, not a place where, I'm overreactive, not a place where, and maybe some of that's true in there, but oh, this is a place where our imprints are pinging, and start to get curious about that. That is a game changer, because suddenly neither of you is bad or wrong. And it's just that your imprints are pinging. And so this is the power of mapping your imprint. I have a whole process, a visual process too, of getting to know. And one of the things that I love doing in the mapping your relational imprint container I'm offering is I can also do this with couples. So for example, you can come in and I can help you figure out, where are we pinging? What's his imprint or her imprint? What's his or her imprint? And how are they pinging? Because when we start to understand that, and I've been training in this a long time and working with couples a long time, so I can see it, I can pick it out, I can find it with you, and know the right questions to ask. It can be a game changer. Suddenly there's a way through. Suddenly there's new ingredients that can be brought in that you didn't even know were possible. And I don't think that Mike and I could be navigating in such a powerful way as a couple if we didn't have this skill, honestly. It's sort of the foundational skill that helps us to keep evolving together. And I wanted to share it with you. So let this digest in your cells. This is a lot. And it will land not only in your mind, but in your body and your cells. So let the stories I told let the words I've spoken slowly land over the next few days. Keep an eye out for my masterclass. I might even have the sales page down there so that you can actually sign up. And also, there's a link below in my notes too to sign up for a 20-minute free tuning in call where we could feel into if you'd like to do a private mapping your relational imprint container, a 2-month container, 3 sessions. We're connected through WhatsApp. It could be you or it could be you and your partner. And then so you could just book a 20-minute tuning in call and we can feel out if it's the right fit for you. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to talk about it. And thank you so much for listening. Please share this if you feel like it could help someone. The more that our listeners share the podcast, it helps it spread and it supports us in our mission to bring more healthy, sacred relationship into the world. And also, we would be so grateful if you gave us a 5-star rating, made a comment of some kind in the post. Thank you so much, loves.